Hello witches and warlocks, and welcome back to my channel. So nice to see you again. So this is the second part to my beginner's witch series. So basically this is a series for witches that are new to the craft, and I've got a few on my channel already, which is why I've decided to do this, because I get a lot of questions about how do I start? Where do I begin? It's very confusing. What do I start with? Where did you start? I get lots and lots of questions, and I just thought to myself, why not do a series that discusses witchcraft and what goes with it and what's around it and where I started and how I got into witchcraft myself. So again, before I start this video, I'd like to make a big disclaimer just to say that this is just my opinion. This is not gospel, okay? So there are many people on the internet with different opinions about witchcraft and the world of the occult and many different things that go with the religion and also the art of the craft itself, okay? So it is to the people out there watching this video, and it's totally up to you whether you decide to take on board what I'm saying and use it in your own path. But at no point throughout this video am I ever going to say that what I say is what you have to do, okay? That's not the point of this video at all. This video is a chance for you guys to hear my side of the story, to hear how I have learned through the years. And if you take on board anything that I have said to you today, then that's a bonus. And if you don't believe in anything I've said today, then you have many options throughout the internet to go and watch and find out for yourself. But this is purely just so you can get a heads up on how this works. Everything I say in this video today regarding witchcraft, most of what you'll hear today is the history rather than the actual practical use that I use a lot of the time. As I said before in my last video, where I asked you 6 questions to ask yourself. So I gave 6 questions to say, go away, ask yourself these 6 questions, and then your answer to those 6 questions will then hopefully reflect on what I've got to tell you today. So if you haven't watched that video, you can go back. It was, I do believe it was the last video I put on. It's in my list down below. So yeah, so have a little look and watch that one first, and it will explain to you what I'm doing throughout my series. So I'm going to go through these 6 questions throughout the series. So we're going to start with question number 1 for this particular part of the series. So the question I asked you was, what brings you to the craft? Okay, so many of you out there will be thinking, you know, what is it that brings me to the craft? I want to try something new. I want to do something new. I want a new religion. You know, I want something that cries out to me. Something I want to experiment and explore my different things to do. Okay, so that's the question I asked you. So the 2 answers that I've given for this question was religion and witchcraft. Okay, so the reason I say witchcraft is, are you here just for the witchcraft and the actual art of witchcraft, as in like the actual practical side of witchcraft, as in learning the ins and outs of the practical side of witchcraft, okay, which we'll go into. And then, of course, there's the other side of witchcraft, which is the religion, okay? Now, whether you accept it or not, when you start witchcraft, there is always an element of religion involved, okay? I used to believe that you could actually be a witch and not have a religion. However, going into the craft started with a religion around it, okay? So there are some aspects of even doing practical work where the craft does touch on religion, okay? it's based on a religion. Okay, the craft comes from a particular religion. Okay, so when I asked myself about religion and I asked myself about witchcraft, the best place to start for either of these aspects, okay, so whether you decide you want to do, you want to be religious, okay, and go into the religious side of things and still be a witch, still do witchcraft. Maybe you just want to go into the witchcraft side of things, which is fine. Okay, either way, there's one thing you have to do that involves both of these subjects. Okay, and that's the history behind both subjects. So the history of the religion and the history of witchcraft. Okay, how did the religion start, and how did witchcraft start? Okay, and they are very entangled. Okay, so for instance, we'll start with the religious side of things. I follow the religions around witchcraft. Okay, so basically, the history of religion. So basically, there is a term you'll hear a lot of the time, and I use it all the time, which is pagan. Okay, now I am a pagan, and the pagan, being a pagan is not just one religion. Okay, so a pagan is an umbrella term to describe different religions that are not your typical top 5 or 6 religions. Okay, now how I say this is obviously you've got Christianity, Judaism, Catholicism, and obviously there is Anglo-Saxon as well. I do believe that comes under that term. So basically, Christianity was a religion that was made by the state, and basically it was a religion that came around within the kings and queens of England. Okay, and it sort of spread around the world. So it was a way of following one deity, you know, just one God, one true God, and the Christian believe that there is only one God. There is a God, and to some extent there is a devil. Okay, so it's good and evil, black and white. That is it. Along with that comes lots and lots and lots and lots of rules. Okay, of what you can and cannot do. Then, obviously, you've got Catholicism, which is, again, Christianity is, again, another umbrella term. Under Christianity comes a lot of other religions. Okay, there are many, many religions under Christianity. Okay, and they all have their little things that they have that are different. However, they all believe in one God. Okay, then you've got paganism. Okay, now paganism, the umbrella term of paganism covers a lot of different religions. So Druidism, you've got the Norse religion, which is the Norse gods, Greek mythology. There are many, 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 many. And the reason they're split off into two is because the Christian umbrella believe in one deity. Pagan religions believe in many deities. So many gods, many goddesses will be part of their religion. Okay, so paganism is not just one religion. Okay, there are many aspects to paganism. Okay, and then that goes into so that's around the religious side of things. Okay, so we're going to go into witchcraft now. Now, witchcraft again comes from the term of Wicca. Okay, so you were a Wiccan. Now, to be a witch back in medieval times and many long time ago, around the occult, in villages in England mainly at the time, they would have women mostly who would be almost like a doctor in a way. People would go in the village, would go to them for help, advice, medicines, lotions, potions, and they would usually be what they call a medicine woman, okay? And because obviously the term of witchcraft is a term of discovering ways of using nature to help the body and the mind and stuff like that. So, so back in the day, the term was a witcher or a Wiccan, as it came out to be. Okay, now these were basically, like I said, women in villages who were practicing different medicines and different things that were seen as very much what we know today as spells and potions. Okay, and they used to help the villages. They were not in any way nasty or horrible. Okay, so throughout the years, over the time, through different aspects around the world, okay, as things, as obviously people were traveling the world and discovering new things, along came different religions, different ways of working, different medicines, and before that happened, before you knew it, we had what we call the occult in a way. So every single place around the world, every country in the world had a witch doctor or someone who was practicing different forms of witchcraft. Okay, as it was later deemed. So we had voodoo, and we had witchcraft, and we had nature-based religions. Now these people would tend to believe in more than one god. Okay, so it would be a nature-based sort of religion in a way. So they would believe that there would be a god for each aspect of each element. So the earth, air, fire, water, spirit. There would be a god for a god and goddess to describe the sun, the moon. This changing of the seasons, and all of this was something that was a religion. And so what happened then? Things started to split off. So you had people. The Norse religion came from, obviously, the belief that there was gods in Valhalla, and there was Thor and Loki and Odin, and all these big religions that came from the Vikings. Okay, and they brought that religion over to us. Okay, we also had Druidism, where people would believe in nature and the way around it. And before long, these things got mixed together and became almost an occult way of thinking. Okay, now all of this would happen. This would then go into different ways of working. So you would have people who would do rituals, and people that would sacrifice animals, and things like that would occur. Okay, and before you knew it, what happened was you had your solitary witches, okay, who were your medicine women's in different villages. And then you would have what we now know today as covens, okay, where groups of people would get together and they would celebrate what they believed in. Okay, so that's where witchcraft evolved from. Okay, different aspects. Okay, now then from there we had the term Wicca. Okay, so the history of Wicca is that many people out there say that there was a king of Wicca. Okay, the man who invented Wicca, which is Gerald Gardner. This however, was not entirely true. Okay, now Gerald Gardner was a gentleman who grew up all around the world. Okay, he was a very sick child, and he would go off. He got sent off away from his family to go and study in other countries where he could get better and become stronger. And they believed that by sending him off into hot countries, the heat would make him better. Okay, because he was very ill. He had lung problems and breathing problems, and so they believed sending him to the sun would heal him. while Gerald Gardner was in these countries growing up, he came across many different things. So he came across different tribes in different countries who would celebrate their traditions by having bonfires and being completely and utterly naked and dancing around the bonfire, chanting and painting themselves with different substances, like from the dirt and the clay and all these different things. And it fascinated him so unbelievably that when he was older and he came back to Britain, he moved down to a place called Devon, where he spent the rest of his life. Okay, now during his time in Devon, he became a naturist, okay, which is a nudist. And he would get together with local people in the area. In his garden, he would have parties and barbecues and different get-togethers where they would be completely and utterly naked. Okay, and he thought this was amazing. He totally loved everything around him in nature, and he liked all that sort of aspect. And he always had this like want of search of different strange ways of doing stuff from different religions. He was never really a Christian, okay? So he then found and came across, this is still unknown completely, whether how this happened or what happened, but he basically said that at one point he was taken away by a group of people who blindfolded him, took him to this place, and he was inducted into the first, what we now know as a coven, okay, where they would do rituals and they would do different ceremonies, and they would dance naked, and they would wear different crowns, and they would use different instruments to invoke what they call energies. Okay, so during this time, the war had started. The war had begun to start. So Gerald Gardner then was taken with his coven to a place in the New Forest, which is where Gerald Gardner was known for doing his practice of witchcraft. So they got together, they built a fire, and they chanted and came up with a spell where they made what they call a cone of power. They directed this cone of power over to Germany towards Hitler, and they were seen to say that it would repel him from coming across to the country. This was entirely true, as it never happened. It never came to pass. We were invaded, but as far as I know, Hitler never came or made it to the shores of Britain. And this was, obviously we all know we were invaded, and we all know that there were, bombs dropped and all stuff like this. But Hitler himself, as a person, as far as I know, never made it to the shores of Britain. And then they still say to this day that it was because of Gerald Gardner and his coven. During this time, after the ceremony, they were sent to say that it was so powerful that it literally drained people of their energy so much that weeks later, some of the coven died because of their age. Obviously, because they were quite older now. Gerald Gardner was quite old. That's why he never went to war. He was too old at the time to be sent away to fight. So most of the people were about his age. So when you do a spell, it does exert a lot of energy, and I can imagine with something so strong and so powerful, I can understand why maybe it took a lot of energy from these people. Anyway, Gerald Gardner then took everything he learned from his coven and the things he learned from around the world and wrote them down in his, what we now know as, Book of Shadows. Okay, now this became what we now know today as Wicca. Okay, so the reason he is so well known as and in some terms seen as the person who invented Wicca, is because he brought Wicca to the world. Okay, he was so determined that what he was doing was so amazing. The whole world needed to know about this. People needed to know about this. He did not want this religion to die off. Okay, he wanted people around the world to know Wicca existed. Okay, so he took aspects of every single thing he found, from Satanism, from from different countries around the world, different occults, which is stuff like people that were into fortune telling, people that were into the Ouija board, and spiritualists, people who believe they could talk to the dead. Mexican religion, where they have the Day of the Dead and how they could speak to their ancestors and use the power of their ancestors. All this came into one lump sum for Gerald Gardner, which was Wicca. Okay, he then went on to become the most famous man ever at that time. Now you've got to imagine this is the 1950s. So Gerald Gardner went on national TV and was interviewed about Wicca. And he let the whole world know. Now, at this time, not many people know this, but to be part of the occult side of things at this time was against the law in Britain. And it can mean that you could potentially be arrested, okay? Because there were laws around studying. Because we were brought up with a Christian religion in this country, and the Church of England, that it was deemed that witchcraft was the work of the devil. Okay, so people did not understand, and Gerald Gardner wanted people to understand. And because of him, people now all around the world knew about Wicca. Okay, which is where the basis of witchcraft comes from. All right, so this is why I say, when you go into witchcraft or paganism, any form of paganism, okay, whether that be whatever religion you may be under that umbrella of paganism, okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that, of course, as you know, you can be a Christian and still study witchcraft, okay, that you don't have to be a pagan or Druid or Norse or whatever. You don't even have to have a religion in a way. You don't have to believe in the religious side of things to do the practice of witchcraft. Okay. However, there are some major aspects of witchcraft that does involve Wicca. Okay, and it's now today you'll find that there is such thing as people who follow the garden, the Gardine, or the Gerald Gardner way of working, which is the Wiccan side of working. So if you're a Gardnerian, it means that you follow everything that Gerald Gardner put in his books, and you follow the Wiccan Rede, and you follow the threefold, which is whatever you put out there into the world comes back to you threefold. There are many different things. And there are people like myself who believe that I'm an eclectic witch. Okay, now an eclectic witch means that, like Gerald Gardner, I take bits and pieces of different religions and make them work for me. Okay, because I don't follow everything in the Wiccan religion. Okay, I don't follow everything in the in the different pagan religions. I just like to pick and choose what works for me, which makes sense to me. Okay, and this is a very popular thing to this day. And there is more eclectic witches out there than there ever was before, way back in the day. Most people start off with the Wiccan religion and the Wiccan way of working, and they tend to veer off throughout. There are more solitary witches out there than there ever was. Covens are very few and far between. And of course, when it comes to covens and solitary witches, okay, is something I will go into. So that's a very basic view and a very basic history of obviously Wicca and witchcraft, okay, and how they go together, and obviously the pagan history as well, because as we know, back in the day when Christianity was around, paganism or the pagan religions, and at the time, the reason we were called pagans, which is a very interesting story, because the pagan term comes from the term of the religion of the poor. Okay, so, or the paupers, or the basically it was seen as the poor people's religion. Okay, which is why pagan came around, because all rich queens, kings, people around the queen's court and the king's court would be Christian. And the rest of the people were paupers. They were lower than low. They were the villages around them. They were the poor people around them that were that they were pagans. It was the pagan religion. It was a poor person's religion, which is why Christianity wanted to stamp it out. Which is then when you came to things like the witch trials. Okay, so basically, when I spoke about before, the ladies who would be in the villages who would be almost like witch doctors. Okay, they would be medicine women. They would have a certain way of working, and it would tend to be a nature-based, a kitchen witch or a green witch, as we call them nowadays. Okay, so they were seen to be working for the devil by the Christians. So what they would do is they would persecute them and burn them at the stake, which is where we had the witch trials. Okay, and this happened to be because, obviously, as you know, Britain at the time, because the Wiccan religion is British, it originated from Europe and Britain and the UK. So when we invaded most of the world, which we did, we went to America and we took along with us Christianity, and of course, then when it went to Salem, and in Salem they had these medicine women. Again, that's where it was a term to basically put women in their place, because they didn't want women speaking up. They didn't want women having their own independence. They wanted to lock them down to being, mothers and home keepers. They didn't want women to have a view. So if a woman stood up for herself or stepped out of line, they would call her a witch and then burn her at the stake or drown her in a well. And a lot of them weren't even witches back then, so it was a hard time. The same happened in this country too, but they burned them at the stake, and that was because Christianity believed that was the one true religion, because everyone else believed in other gods. If you believed in more than one god, you therefore were a Satanism. You were working for the devil, possessed, because there is only one God. And the same goes for when we invaded other countries like India and places like that, because they believed in more than one God. We didn't believe that should be the case, so Christianity went over and was like, no, there's one God. And it's still happening to this day. Oh yes. So that's a little brief history of where it all came from. So the reason I talk about history is when you learn your history, you need to learn about three things. Okay, so the three things are Wicca. Obviously, I've taken you into a very, very brief story of Gerald Gardner and how he brought Wicca into the world. Okay, so do read up on that, because there's a very interesting story. There are some great stories on here. If you go onto YouTube and put in Gerald Gardner history, or the history of witchcraft, or history of Wicca, the main documentary where I learned most of my stuff from is on there, and you can watch it. It's a great documentary. Okay. Then the second thing is obviously the pagan religions. You need to have a look into pagan history. Okay, so do have a look at pagan history because it's quite fun. And the third thing is books. Okay, so whatever you do, religion side of things or witchcraft side of things, you need to read some books. Okay, yes, there are many, many things on the internet that you can watch. There are many, many things that you can look at on the internet. However, I don't think there's something quite like owning a book, reading that book, and marking off and highlighting in that book what interests you. Okay, what jumps out at you. Compare them. Compare these books because most of the people out there will be Wiccan based, and they'll all come from the same thing, which is the Gerald Gardner way of thinking, which is bringing Wicca to you. Most all witches I know have a Wiccan based religion or Wiccan start to their witchcraft. Okay, I started off as Wiccan, and I think most of the people I know would have started off as a Wiccan. Okay. So those three things you need to think about when it comes to history of witchcraft, okay? So before you do anything, learn where it came from, learn where it's based, learn what of those three aspects come to you. Because regardless, if you just want to learn witchcraft, okay, you're going to need books to do that, okay? You're going to need a Book of Shadows. You're going to need reference books. You're going to need to have books about different aspects of witchcraft. Okay, if you want to be a pagan, you're gonna have to learn how to the history of pagan religions and the different deities that come along with those, and what are you going to use with those deities, because there are many. There are many, many, many. Even in in Islam, they have many gods. In Egypt, they worshipped many goddesses and gods. There are many people around the world that are different umbrella of paganism. Okay, and of course Wicca. If you need to learn about Wicca. You can't be a witch unless you learn about Wicca. And you can take what you want from Wicca and use it as yourself. But what you're learning, witchcraft and Wicca, they're one and the same thing for me. Okay, so do learn about those three things and use books and internet if you want to, but I like a reference books that I can highlight and read about and reference to different books. Okay, so basically you'll learn about the history of witchcraft before you can start anything else really. So I hope that sort of, in a weird way, answers the question, what brings you to the craft? Because they're the sort of three different aspects of what should bring you to the craft. The religious side of things, the practical side of things, and the history of things, because this is a very, very respected religion, okay? Very, very respected religion. And it's been around for a very long time. Even before Gerald Gardner came along, we had the occult, okay? We had different aspects of the religion, and this is where witchcraft came from, okay? Many different places all around the world, okay, came together to form what we know now as Wicca, which is the modern witchcraft that we use today, okay? And it's a very rich history, and it's a very powerful history, okay? And that's what you need to know. So whether you do the practical side, whether you do the religious side, you need to decide what brings you to witchcraft and the realms of being a witch. Okay, because you need to understand what your view is on being a witch, where you're coming from, because that will reflect where you're going in the future. You need to know where you've come from to reflect to where you're going to go. Okay, and that will change. Don't think that for 1 second what you believe today will be the same 50 years down the line. It's not going to be. It's going to change. Could change weekly, could change monthly, yearly. I've many times changed my views on different things. Okay, so these are things that obviously, as you know, are history. Okay, these are not something that I've decided that this is the way that the world came about of witchcraft. This is not my view. This is pure history. And the reason I know about witchcraft is because I read into that history. I learned about that history. I watched a documentary about that history. I learned about the person who brought this into our country, you know, who started us all off. If it hadn't been for Gerald Gardner, okay, we would not know modern witchcraft as it is today. It would have been a completely different story, okay, because a lot of the things that that came to witchcraft were deemed as occult, and it was the devil's work, so it was outlawed to do. You know, it was seen that you know, tarot and all that sort of stuff, and you know, communing with the dead and having visions and you know, knowing stuff you shouldn't, that was deemed as devil worship. And if it hadn't been for Gerald Gardner going into national TV and opening up to the world that he was a witch, and that this was witchcraft, and what you believe is not true, this is actually what we do. It's nature-based, it's very nice, it's not evil. You know, he opened the world up to this religion, and that's why we do it today. So I hope this has helped. This is obviously just part of my series. Do go and explore the history of witchcraft, because it's very, very interesting. And it will, you know, determine where you're going to go in your path. I hope this has helped. So don't forget, if you have liked my video, give me a little thumbs up. If you've got any questions, then by all means, do put them down. But I am having a Q&A session at the end of this month, in the last week of March. And you can ask me a question, any question you like. It doesn't necessarily even have to be technically about witchcraft. It could be about my journey. It could be about anything else that I do that you want to know about. Obviously, keep it... try and keep it around the realms of witchcraft, but obviously, you know, there are some aspects of my life that I will keep to myself. But if there are something you really want to know about me, then put the hashtag Q&A in the comments, and then your question, and I'll know to leave it till the end of March to answer. But if there's something you're really desperate to know about, then just ask me a question. If it's about what you've heard today, that's fine too. So yeah, so I will be doing a Q&A at the end of the month. Obviously, as you know, it's the start of the month, so there is many things coming on my channel, many unboxings. This month is probably the most unboxings I'm ever going to do on my channel this month. So I think this is probably going to be the max amount of unboxings. There are going to be a lot of unboxings this month. So so do look out for those. I'm really excited about getting them through the post. So yeah, so thank you very much for watching. Remember, stay safe, and you be you, and blessed be.